So the most anticipated game this year is Starfield. Whether you're on Xbox or not, it's going to be the game that everybody is going to be talking about. I think it is going to be a generational game, especially after everything they showed off at the Xbox showcase and the Starfield Direct, where it was about a 45-minute video going into depth about everything that the game has to offer. It is literally a game where you can do whatever you want. You don't even have to go through all of the quests if you don't want to, or at least at that time that you're playing. You can explore, space combat, stealing ships, finding planets, building bases, all of that type of stuff. It sounds just an absolutely amazing game that you're going to be able to get lost in for hours and hours to come. So hopefully when it does release, it does live up to expectations. Obviously, there is the 30 FPS thing that people have been talking about, but Todd Howard went into more depth into what we can be expecting from this game with some more features on the Kind of Funny Games cast. And we have a bit more information here to talk about. And on top of that, we also got some information about the release of this game, the physical edition. There was some confusion, and we will go over that. So Todd Howard was on with Kind of Funny talking about Starfield, and he gave us some more information on some things that we can expect. He talked about accessibility options, as well as the planets and vehicles and that type of stuff, and 30 FPS, and kind of what his feelings were on that and why they went with 30 FPS. So when it comes to accessibility and in-game support for this game, Todd Howard says this: one thing that we're really leaning in on with this game is having a large font mode, which is important in an RPG where there's lots of stuff to read. So it comes into play, obviously for accessibility, but also various monitor sizes. So depending on the screen size that you play, you can change obviously the font sizes, the text on the screen to be able to read it better. If you're playing far away from your TV, that will be helpful. If you're playing in front of a monitor, you probably can reduce it. But what he says next here is something that I think we're going to see a lot more of this going forward, especially with all of the releases of these gaming PC handhelds. He says, I'm noticing that's really helpful when I play. There's a lot more handheld devices coming out where you can stream these games or sometimes even play them natively, and it really helps us there as well. So that's one in particular that we're leaning in on. So it makes me instantly think about the ROG Ally that just came out, which you could kind of say is the official third-party Xbox handheld, as they have the advertising for Game Pass with the ROG Ally, and it has native Windows, native Game Pass, all of that stuff on there. And I think a lot of people will be trying to play this game on that device. It is a RPG where you're going to be spending tons of hours into it. If you can pick up a handheld and just jump in and do a couple of things, it's going to be very enticing to do that with a handheld stuff. Or even if you have like a Steam Deck to see, maybe it'll run on that. Who knows what the FPS will be? Probably won't be that great. But at the same time, you can also utilize Xbox Cloud Gaming on these handhelds, which work phenomenally. And you have the full controls with a decent size screen, but accessibility and increasing the font size will be something useful when you're playing in handheld mode. Now, we don't know whether the game will be Steam Deck compatible. I know the ROG Ally is out, but for me, I have a Steam Deck. And since it's been out longer, there's probably way more people that are going to be wanting to utilize the Steam Deck as of right now to play this game. I wonder if this game will eventually end up being Steam Deck compatible to be at least playable with some sort of settings changes with the PC version of the game. Now, when we talk about the planets in Starfield, it's been something since they first announced it that's kind of been controversial, and I don't really know why. People saw 1,000 planets and there was a negative reaction, or at least half of the crowd there was a negative reaction, because they thought Bethesda was not going to put enough into the planets out there that where the story takes place, which I don't believe whatsoever. I mean, we've seen them walk through some of the main planets in the showcase and just how detailed the world does look, and the NPCs and everything there. I think it is going to be extremely detailed and very interesting. But there's over 1,000 worlds in this game, which is going to be nuts. And it's going to be huge for mods, going to be huge for exploration, for building a base, and just kind of creating your own world within the Starfield universe. And when it comes to which planets will support life, Todd Howard says about 10% of the planets players can visit will support life, and also confirms there's no land vehicles or mountable creatures for where you can use to traverse them. And I feel like that will be disappointing to some people. We'll have to wait and see how that all plays out with these planets and how big every single one is. Will you even really need a mount or a land vehicle to go across them? But I think the focus in terms of vehicles is going to be far more on the space combat and the space travel than it will be actually traversing through land. You have a jetpack, so you're going to be able to fly around in your jetpack, and we've seen some of the movement there. It looks pretty smooth. It looks like it will be a lot of fun jumping around, especially when you're taking out enemies. And then he says that here, when he talks about the boost pack, he says, we've seen this with our other games where we want to design it so it feels good on foot, but we do have the boost pack. You saw some of that in the video, and you have skills for the boost pack. So the boost pack almost acts like this vehicle. It's super fun where you can fly through, and then the low gravity plans are just really, really something special in the game. I'm interested in what that means for the skills for the boost pack. Just higher boosting up, probably faster traversal across. I think it'll be really cool, and it'll make you choose, I guess, how you want to spend your skills, whether you want to use it on combat, whether you want to use it on other things, or do you want to use it on increasing your traversal across each one of these planets by upgrading your boost pack. And then, as we've already talked about this, but when it comes to the 30 FPS, again, this is what Todd Howard says. He says, ultimately, look, we boil it down to we wanted the consistency. The game is running great, but we don't want players to ever think about it. We have obviously seen other games that have performance modes, and we lean towards consistency overall. And we talk to our fans and hear that from everybody. So they're really feeling great. The game feels great in your hands. And I would say, look, developers know this, but there are things that you can do to make that look and feel great. Things like motion blur, how fast the game refreshes or reacts to a controller input. All of those things matter to something feeling great. And I can honestly say this is the best feeling game that we've had. And from what we saw, it did look like it felt great, even at 30 frames per second, which is going to be what you're going to be playing it on the Xbox consoles. And this whole 30 frames per second debate, I think, is becoming more and more clear, especially with recent releases. I mean, we just saw Final Fantasy 16 release. Game looks really good, but there are a lot of issues in performance mode, that so much so that you have the analysts out there that do their whole FPS analysis, like Digital Foundry, suggesting that you don't play in performance mode. They're suggesting play it in quality mode just because it is extremely unstable in performance mode. And when we talk about the creative vision of Starfield, in my opinion, it's not 4K or 1440p or whatever resolution the screen that you're playing it on. It's making sure that you aren't pulled out of the immersion because you're noticing the frame rate drop as you're doing certain actions on screen, as enemies pop in, as something else pops in on the screen, which was something that they even said, Digital Foundry said during the Final Fantasy 16 review, that was taking away from the immersion because of the frame rate drop. And because of how detailed Starfield is supposedly going to be, they don't want that happening, which is why it makes more sense overall for Todd Howard's creative vision of locking it at 30 frames per second on console so that immersion isn't taken away. And I'm sure when we talk about this, there are still people out there that absolutely will always want that choice. I would be completely fine if they did put that choice in to still have a performance mode. Actually, I think that why not? But if they did do that, you definitely know once the game was released, there would be a lot of negative backlash at the release of the game because of the fact that the game probably wouldn't be able to keep a steady 60 frames per second. Or you could go along the lines of what Final Fantasy 16 did. Just put out 60 frames per second performance mode, knowing full well that the game isn't going to stay at 60 frames per second, and having to drop down the resolution so far down to like 720p in order to even hit anywhere near 60 frames per second steadily. That's something that obviously with Starfield was not wanting to be done on the console, so they went with the 30 frames per second. And, you know, I'm going to be playing it on the Series X, so I'm actually pretty okay with that if it feels as good as he's saying and it feels as good as it looks. Now, when it comes to the actual physical editions of Starfield, we know there's the Constellation Edition, there's the regular edition, and people were wondering, are these games coming with a disc? Because we look here at the picture of the Constellation Edition, it's kind of cut off here, but the game code comes on like a collector's little pendant thing with it inscribed on it, which is kind of cool. I personally would rather a disc. I complained about this when God of War Ragnarok came out with their special edition, the Jotnar edition, and even the edition just under that, which I believe is just the collector's edition or whatever, didn't come with a disc. It was a download code. And I thought that was absurd because they're giving you a steelbook without a disc. It's just for display, the steelbook. I think it's stupid. I don't like when companies do this. And Starfield is doing a similar thing here with the Constellation Edition, giving you a steelbook and then just a download code. But at least the download code is on something collectible as well, but I would have much rather had a disc inside at that steelbook display. Thing with the Constellation Edition, that Starfield Chronomark watch, it's going to be, it just looks really cool. And that alone, I think, is very enticing for people to want to go out and buy this thing. Now, when it comes to the regular edition of the game, there was some stuff going around where people were saying there was no disc within the physical edition, and it's because Bethesda support responded to this tweet here saying, hey, Bethesda support, will the physical standard edition of Starfield for the Series X include a disc? And they respond, hello, all physical editions include a code for the chosen platform. There are no physical discs. And they have now gone ahead and actually deleted that tweet. And the reason they've probably gone ahead and deleted that tweet is because the Spanish Bethesda account came out and actually gave an answer to this question as well. And they say here, hello partners, it depends on the edition. For example, the standard has a disc, while the Constellation Edition has a code engraved on a collector's item, which you can see in the image. And again, here is the image, and there is the collector's item that will have the code on it. But the standard edition, we can rest easy, at least from what they're saying here, will actually have a disc in it. I think it would be absolutely absurd to sell a physical game case with a download code in it. And looks like that is not going to be the case. But a lot of people are still reporting that all of the Bethesda releases for Starfield, the standard, the collectors, the Constellation Edition, all that stuff, is going to not have any disc. But that seems like it is not the case, unless, again, they do come out and re-clarify it. But it seems like the main Starfield support account was mistaken here, which is why they deleted the tweet. But I will leave the video there, guys. I can't wait for Starfield. Let me know what you think about all this information. Are you excited for it? And what edition of the game did you get? If you enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up. If you're new here, hit that subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.